Good morning. I'm harleysch from the LaRouche organization with your daily update for October 12th, 2021. Perhaps you've noticed that there's been very little discussion in the recent days of the situation in Afghanistan after we were bombarded with weeks of coverage as the crisis there unfolded after the U.S. withdrawal. It seems to have disappeared from the news. Now, that doesn't mean there's nothing going on. In fact, there are some urgent things that must be done, and I'm going to catch you up on a few of these developments. First of all, the need for humanitarian aid is urgent. The U.S. Treasury is still holding over $7 billion of money that belongs to the people of Afghanistan. Now, it's being held because we say we haven't recognized the government, we're not sure the government is viable, we don't want to give money to the Taliban. But that is the government, and to withhold that means that you're putting you're basically placing a starvation situation on the people of Afghanistan. The World Food Program head David Beasley has warned that as many as 4 million children are food insecure and hungry, and that will only worsen as winter comes in. The starvation for possibly millions of people in Afghanistan. Also, people will freeze to death. It's a very cold winter is expected. There's no money to purchase energy that's needed. There's no medicine available. The Doctors Without Borders have issued a call for the funds to be released. Now, to be clear, in addition to the $7 billion withheld that's in the U.S. Treasury, there's another almost $1.5 billion, which is held in other international banks that are following the lead of the Treasury. The International Monetary Fund withheld $370 million in immediate funds that were supposed to be made through special drawing rights, and the World Bank is holding on to $440 million that they have not released. Now, it's wrong to have collective punishment. The war is over. We've withdrawn. At the end of World War II, the United States adopted a policy of rebuilding the nations that were destroyed in the war. This is something we should do not alone, but in conjunction with the neighbors of Afghanistan, with Pakistan, with China, with Russia, with Iran, with other countries in the region. And the United States should be a part of that. That's the tradition that was established after World War II. And it's in the interest of the United States to make sure that Afghanistan is not a failed state. Now, in this context, there were talks over the last 2 days between U.S. officials and Taliban officials in Doha. And this was reported by both sides to have been candid and professional. The U.S. raised its concerns about human rights violations there. The Taliban spoke about that. They asked that the funds be released. And the Taliban reaffirmed that they would not allow their country to be used as a safe haven for terrorists. And there are reports of fighting going on in some parts of the country between the Taliban military and ISIS-K, which is the local ISIS affiliate that was responsible for the bomb that went off at the Karzai International Airport. Now, further, there's a report, interesting, that heroin addicts who were living on the streets of Kabul were swept up by Taliban officials and taken to drug treatment centers. Now, they don't have a lot of the necessary drugs that are needed to treat people who are going through withdrawal, but they're going to keep people in these centers for 45 days in the hopes that they can get them off heroin as part of their anti-drug policy. I certainly hope the human rights mafia will not call these concentration camps. An honest effort being made to clean up the drug problem would go a long way toward resolving some of the tensions that have existed in the past between Western governments and also Russia and China, where a lot of the heroin that comes into those countries has come from Afghanistan. And by the way, from the British sector in Helmand province in Afghanistan. So that catches you up a little bit on what's happening in Afghanistan. Let me give you a couple updates from yesterday on China. A retired U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel, Daniel Davis, has written an article about this Wall Street Journal report of the U.S. Special Forces units, maybe 20, 25 people, that are training members of the Taiwan Army and Navy and conducting training operations inside Taiwan. Now, Davis warned of the danger of loose talk of war with China. And he said there's no scenario by which we can win a war with China over Taiwan. That is, if China does invade Taiwan, there's no way to win that war short of nuclear weapons. And he criticized those such as the Navy Secretary Del Toro, who insisted that China is preparing to attack Taiwan. A Taiwan Defense Ministry official said, "Oh, don't worry, we can hold out for as many as 2 to 3 months until foreign countries come in to help us." Well, good luck with that. The better thing is to avoid a war, to continue a peaceful discussion, a negotiation. And in this, Chinese President Xi Jinping said, there's no hurry for China for reunification, that this should be a peaceful process. Now, joining the people issuing warnings was Scott Ritter, the whistleblower from Iraq, who simply said if China did invade Taiwan, it would fall within a week, and there's nothing the U.S. could do unless we're willing to risk an all-out nuclear war. Now, a third area that just keep your eye on this is the growing battle between the European Union trying to impose its one policy from the top versus national sovereignty. We know there's a fight going on in Hungary. The Czech government just fell. The Austrian government was just brought down under scandal charges, financial scandal, although it looks as though that situation will resolve itself in a better way. The Czech Republic, it's hard to know what's going to happen. But interesting is the fight over Poland. The Polish Supreme Court ruled that Polish law takes precedence over European law and rulings from the European Court when it comes to what's done in Poland. This is an assertion of national sovereignty. This came up a little more than a year ago when the German Constitutional Court in Karlsruhe issued a ruling that the German government does not have to abide by EU regulations on bond sales. Now, this was somewhat swept away and negotiated and disappeared as an issue. But it doesn't really disappear as an issue. The question of sovereign nation states in Europe can work together in common cause, but not under a so-called federal constitution in which the rules are being made by the bankers, the same way the Great Reset and Green New Deal would work. And what we're seeing is part of the fight that's going on against this supranational government that is an attempt to impose one rule of the so-called rules-based order that every nation must submit to. This is not going to work on the Green New Deal. That's why there's talk of the COP26 conference falling apart. They're trying to say now that, well, the energy crisis, the shortage of energy, the high cost of energy might undermine the agreements that need to be reached at COP26. There's no need to reach agreements there. There is no climate crisis. There's a stupidity crisis. And I think it's important that people look at the wake-up call that was issued by Professor Burkhout and Helge Zepp-LaRouche, Burkhout of the Climate Intelligence Group and Helge Zepp-LaRouche of the Schiller Institute, basically saying that the issue here is bigger than energy. It's on the question of the nature of man. Are human beings parasites? Are human beings a threat to humanity, as Klaus Schwab of Davos is saying? Or are human beings possessed of creative reason who can solve problems? And the problem of energy is that we need more energy flux density in our electricity production. We need higher order processes, higher temperature processes. That's how you have clean energy, not by going to windmills and solar, which don't provide adequate energy. So go to the schillerinstitute.com website and download the wake-up call that we've produced. And also, while you're there, download the report that we have, the petition that we have on releasing the funds for Afghanistan. We'll continue to keep you updated on these issues in the days ahead. Thanks for joining me. See you again tomorrow.